Hello, this is Charlie Cleveland, and welcome to episode number 4 of Movie in the Making, where we take you backstage and give you a first-hand look at making a independent Hollywood film from the inside out. Taking a cue from what we've done with video games, most notably Subnautica, but also Natural Selection 1 and 2, where we basically just developed our games in the open with our community and pretty much just showed them everything we were doing as we were doing it. We didn't have any option back then. We had no way to get the word out, so that was the natural way to do it. But now I'm taking a break from video games and working on a few different films and, kind of starting over. So this is a good way to get my start. And as I learn, I'm going to be sharing all that with you guys. So yeah, took a big break between episode 3 and 4. Life got in the way. Of course, we had the LA fires, which were no fun, but came out unscathed after a lot of anxiety and stress. But I've had some other kind of tough stuff happen at the beginning of this year. I think I'm over that now. So anyways, that's why it took a long time to record this episode. And also, I spent a lot of time on the subject of this episode is giving helpful feedback. And I've given a lot of feedback for the past couple months. We have been working with the writers on Nutmeg and Mistletoe, which is our Christmas movie. And we've basically had a B script, like really good, a lot of heart. We loved it. We wanted to make it, but we just really wanted to try to make it an A. And so, for my whole career, I've been making stuff and getting feedback from other people, notably the community and our players and teammates and all that stuff. And now the role is kind of reversed, where someone else is writing the script and I'm giving feedback. I'm writing up notes along with Peter, the director. And I definitely have learned a lot. It's been a little painful, but we're on a good track now. And I wanted to just write up some thoughts. I wrote a blog entry on summarizing what I've learned between games and film. And this podcast is going to go along with that in case you don't feel like reading or you want all the anecdotes and flavor. So without further ado, there are 7 big things that I want to cover today. So again, this is for video games and film. I think there's a lot to share between the two. There are a few differences, but I'm going to concentrate on the commonalities. The first one is do no harm. When you are getting feedback from someone, usually you've just poured your heart and soul into something, and someone decides to give you feedback. They might just crush your dreams. They might just say something kind of mean, or they don't realize how much of you is in the project. And it can really stunt your growth or even get you to stop working on the project altogether. You might even abandon your whole art. So the first thing I would say is do no harm. Make sure the person that you're giving feedback to actually wants your feedback. They may not want it. It may be too early. I think a lot of times you're in a Slack channel with a bunch of people and people are just like chiming in on stuff and it's all unsolicited. And I think it's probably better just to ask someone whether they would like feedback or not. And if they don't, you can respect that. I've also learned that on the game side, there were certain people that when they gave me feedback, I just knew that they would demoralize me. It's not that they were or misintentioned or they were mean. They were great people. But sometimes some people tend to be a little extra negative, and you really need to protect your young. And that's just like a little baby. It needs protection. It's just like a little fledgling idea, piece of art. And you might learn that there are some people that you just don't want to ask for feedback. So that's the first thing. Be really careful about, just remember that creative work is fragile, and you want to make sure that the person actually wants feedback. And make sure that you are maybe weeding out people that have been tough on you in the past. And it might just be a chemistry thing, but you just don't want feedback from them. Number 2, this is probably the biggest note, is you want to be descriptive and not prescriptive. What do I mean by that? So I think of it like going to the doctor, which I hate doing. I'm totally scared of doctors, but that's a different podcast episode. If you went to the doctor and said, I have this condition and I've researched it on the internet and I think I have this and I want this kind of treatment or this medicine or something like that. That is not a good use of, I would say, in general, not a good use of going to a doctor. You want to tell the doctor what symptoms you have and what you're feeling, and let them, the expert, who knows a lot more about medicine or their craft, in this case, if it's art, they know a lot more about it than you do. So it's not that you can't have an opinion. It's not that you can't have ideas about what the fix might be, but you really are there to let them be the expert and let them give you the fixes. So the key here is to focus on how you feel and the symptoms, as it were. So things like, when I got to Act 2, I was confused about, I felt confused about what the characters were doing, or I was bored, at the end of Act 1, or I didn't understand why XYZ happened. Or for a video game, you might say, I don't feel like this upgrade is competitive with the other ones. It just doesn't feel like it's worth it. Or you might say, I'm just not having fun with this aspect. Or there's a lot of downtime, too much downtime when I go from here to here. So you're really focusing on how you feel, and you let the person who's responsible for the work, let them figure out the fix. And this reminds me of a quote that I heard from, I think it was Neil Gaiman was the first time I had heard this. Actually, I heard it from someone else who then attributed it to Neil Gaiman. I looked it up. It is from Neil Gaiman, probably other people too. And his quote is, when people tell you something's wrong, they're almost always right. When they tell you how to fix it, they're almost always wrong. And I definitely know that feeling as a game designer when players tell me what they think needs to change, and I'm just looking at them like they're crazy. But what's immensely valuable is when they tell me what they don't like or what they do like, which I'll get to in a future point here. But tell me about your feelings, and I will group up all those feelings, and I will think about the comprehensive fix, and I will think about a lot of other things to keep the structure correct or to keep the idea of the game or the movie intact. So I think there's one big exception that I can think of in screenwriting, and I wouldn't have thought that this would be helpful, but doing a little research for this episode, I found some people will say, in their notes, usually they talk about notes when you give feedback on a script, and they talk about the notes and the note behind the note. And the note behind the note is often the symptom. And then the note is often the fix. And they might say the bad version is this. And they say, by the end of Act 2, so-and-so can find this device and they can teleport home. And that's how they get home. They're basically giving you a fix. And they're not trying to say that it's a good fix. They're just trying to say that if they preface it with the bad version is, then first they tell you what they didn't like, then they say the bad version of the fix is, and then they're just trying to describe a possible fix that would make them happy. They're not saying it's the best fix. And I think some people don't mind getting the bad version of, and that's the prescription instead of just the description. I think it's okay. And some people seem to actually like that. It's really more of a clarification than anything else. So I would be a little careful with that, but I have noticed people doing it, and it seems like it generally goes over okay. It's probably worth asking the author, do you like it when I say the bad version of, and just give you a potential fix, or does that just bug you? So that's number 2. Be descriptive, not prescriptive, with the caveat in screenwriting around the bad version of. Okay, number 3. This one, I really wish I knew a couple months ago, but that is prioritizing and filtering feedback. So when we went through the notes, many rounds of notes recently on our Christmas movie, we got notes from the whole team with this whole idea that more is better, and we want everyone's voice in there, and we want it to be democratic, and that all sounds great. But what ends up by happening is you end up with like 5 or 10 pages of notes. And a lot of those notes are simple, tiny little notes like this line of dialogue could be tweaked to be like this, and I think it would be a little tighter, a little funnier. And that is right alongside these characters there's no stakes here. or I'm really bored, or I don't understand why this character is doing this, or I hate this character. They're all in a big list, and basically if you don't prioritize and filter your feedback, you just get this giant unordered list, and the writers basically have no idea what is the important stuff and what is the unimportant stuff. And in our case, what ended up happening is our writers tried to address every single note, which, bless them, that's wonderful. They're doing a good job. But then you end up with something that just loses its focus, or it gets diluted or muddy, because it's not really clear what is actually important and what isn't. There's another issue here. Well, I guess I'll get to number 4, where you merge the feedback. But basically, rank the importance, put stuff into one document, and often we found you end up by just deleting all the small stuff. Don't even tell them the small stuff, because like in our case, we didn't have a movie if we didn't solve the big stuff. So if there's only 2 major things and you have 20 minor things, just send them the 2 major things, let them work on that, and then you can go back and you can send them all the notes for the minor things later, if they're even still relevant, which they might not be. We did find that having too much feedback really clouded everything and really stymied us. Okay, number 4, kind of related to that, is merging. You want to merge stakeholder feedback before you give it. And this is something that I'm sure I've been guilty of many a time, and I never knew it. But I definitely felt it recently, where you have 2 stakeholders who want to give feedback, and you might do it asynchronously. So you write up your notes and then you post them somewhere or email them. And then the person who's trying to take the feedback basically gets 2 notes that are conflicting. And they may not actually be totally conflicting, but they could just be slightly conflicting. So if they try to address both notes, it would feel confusing or maybe even impossible. So, but if they want to please both people, like one person is their boss and one person is funding the project, for instance, as a writer, what are you supposed to do? You can't do both. So what we started doing is meeting first, having the stakeholders all get together, compare our notes, and basically agree which ones are the important ones. And anything that looks conflicting, we have to hash that out among ourselves before we show anything to the writers. So we take our notes, we basically have our own internal discussions. This is not a short process. I mean, this can be an hour or 2 meeting easily. And we have to resolve what we want together. Once that happens, we have a new document, and that is neither my notes nor their notes or the other stakeholders. If you have them, it's the aggregated notes, and that is what you deliver to the writers. That helped us a ton. I really wish we had figured that out before. Often, especially I should say, when you have a very cooperative team who really wants to help and they really do want to address everything, and they may not tell you up front, oh man, that sounds conflicting or impossible. They may just work harder to try to make it happen, and then that just gives you delays and problems. Okay, number 5 for giving helpful feedback is emotion is gold. This is a little related to number 2, I would say, but if you think about creative projects like films or video games, music, they're all basically emotion machines. They're mechanisms for creating emotion in the mind of their audience, or in the bodies or the vessels of their audiences. So the people put in their time, attention, and money, and they get back emotion, joy, laughter, catharsis, fear, excitement, adrenaline, terror, etc. So that is, at the end of the day, what commercial art is all about. And so if someone tells you that, oh, I teared up when I read that passage, or that was such an exciting moment at the end of level 3 or something like that. When you get that emotional feedback, you just want to stop and just forget all the other stuff you've been getting. The emotional stuff is the gold. That's the most important thing. And I noticed, I was reminded of this because we had given our Christmas script to someone else, another writer, and he actually said that he teared up at one point in one of the early drafts. And he's a pretty emotional guy. He's very empathetic. But when he says he teared up, that got our attention. We knew that we had to try to keep that moment, and we were on the verge of cutting it. We'd actually, maybe even we had cut it. We had to just drag it back in there because, that is a Christmas movie. You want it to be heartfelt and sentimental. And when you actually achieve that, you really need to pay attention. And I remember, this happened as well in Subnautica. I talk about this a lot, but I remember one of our early players, I saw him on YouTube, and he saw the reefback, which is a giant floating creature. It's kind of like a big tentacle turtle thing. It's magnificent and huge. It had no gameplay effect. It was totally, I thought, kind of stupid. But he said, "There's Cthulhu. I can see Cthulhu." And he's like yelling to his friends, like, "Oh my God, I found Cthulhu." And he's really excited and he's in awe. His mouth dropped open. And that was a huge moment for the game. I didn't even think that was an important creature. I didn't notice that the big creatures were having an effect on our players. Even when they did nothing, terrible animation or no animation, just the fact that it was so big and above the player, and the whole fantasy of being underwater and seeing this creature above you. Maybe there's even a shadow coming down on you. I don't know. But that terror and that awe completely changed the direction of the game for the better. So when you get emotional feedback from anyone, you want to pay attention. That's the most important thing. Number 6. This took us some time too. I really wish I knew this a couple months ago, but you might want to try a working session, i.e. a synchronous meeting instead of back and forth notes. So I'm so used to working asynchronously. Unknown Worlds is a distributed team. It always has been. And I'm so used to sending stuff along and then getting back to work and then receiving it back later and ping-ponging back and forth. But sometimes things get lost in translation. And we were having a problem where we would deliver feedback on the script, and then the writers would go off and write something, and they would deliver something, and it wasn't exactly what we wanted. So then we would give more feedback, and then they'd go away for a week, and it would go back and forth. And we were losing something in translation. I don't view it as anyone's fault. It was just how we were working. So what we started doing, I got this suggestion from a writer friend. He said, well, everyone get in one meeting, beat out the whole act or whatever area that's causing you problems. Just everyone handshake on it. Basically do a brainstorming slash work session and just work it all out. And it takes a lot of time. You don't generally want to do something like that if you don't have to, because it's a few people and it's hours of work. And I feel like it's something we always tried to avoid in the past. But it really moved the needle for us. We were basically able to handshake on certain ideas immediately because we're all in the room. We can all agree. The writers would say they think they can make it work, and we like it. Boom. Everything's decided. And we just go right through the story beat by beat until we have something that we all signed off on in a document. Then the writers can go off and write to those beats. Now, a couple things, we actually did do this in Subnautica, and I will talk about that in a second, but a couple tidbits, recommendations for having meetings like this. I would say that you need a 2 to 3 hour working session, and you don't want to do anything else. So if someone tries to bring up what actors you're going to cast or some scheduling thing, or, I have this question for you about something else, you basically just have to shut it down. You need to stay focused on the one thing. And I also noticed that really more than 2 hours was necessary because we never really hit our momentum until after 2 hours. And the magic that showed up consistently in between the 2 and 3 hour mark was so good. I can't really explain why it happened, but I wouldn't have wanted to have those meetings if we had only gone up to the first 2 hours. They really paid for themselves in that last hour. I don't know if that's some particular aspect of our team, or maybe I believe we all had to really context switch into the problem at hand and just find our groove. And it happened multiple times. So I would say 2 to 3 hours. I also have a firm belief that you don't want to have more than 3 or 4 people max in those meetings. When you get above 4, maybe 5, that's really pushing it. But above that, you really, not everyone can contribute regularly. You're just basically having to be quiet because there's just too many people talking. So I would say 4 is about max. 3 is even better. We did 4 and it worked for us. So we hash out the plan. We're making imperfect choices as we go. We're not trying to make the final anything. We're not trying to create anything perfect. We just want to keep moving, because when you make the holistic progress, I feel like that's where the momentum comes from. So if you start finding yourself getting stuck on something like, how does so-and-so get from one scene to another, or some problem that pops up, you can try to solve it for 30 seconds or a minute tops. If you can't solve it, just put a to-do in your note and just keep moving. That's what worked for us. And I think I guess the jury's still out whether we will be able to fix those other problems, but I do believe we will be able to. What else? Oh, if you're having difficulty trying to justify to whomever that only 3 or 4 people can be in that meeting, sometimes there's some personalities in there or ego, and they really feel like they should be there. You can always record the meeting, and then other people can watch it afterwards. So it's not about keeping it secret. It's just about being efficient. I found that Loom, the tool called Loom, is amazing for just quickly recording a video with a bunch of people, and then you can send it around. You don't have to wait for uploading or anything. It's just a quick link. It's amazing. Just record from your browser. The last thing I would say about working sessions is it's really great to do it in real life together, if at all possible, especially if the stakes are high. If you're having a problem where you might have to cancel your project, or it's really in jeopardy, or it's really costing you a lot of money because of the delays, just go ahead and fly everyone to the same place. It's worth it. I mean, if you have that kind of money, but it really is worth getting everyone in the same room. There's no delays. It's just magic. I do feel like it's really worth the money, and long term, it's going to save you a lot, especially if you're just spending a few $1,000s to move the needle on a big project. What else? If you get roadblocks during the working sessions and things are slowing down, you can always try asking simple questions like, what's the simplest version of XYZ that might possibly work? Or what's a crappy version of this that might get the job done? Or we noticed also, if sometimes we go, we spend, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 minutes on a problem in a meeting, but it's like the 5th or 10th time that problem has come up. Like, what is this character's motivation, for instance, or why is this character in here? At some point, you might ask yourself whether you should just remove the problematic element. Can you just delete it? I feel like that is one of those questions where if you don't ask yourself, you might end up by trying to put a square peg in a round hole for too long. That's it for the working sessions. And finally, number 7, I would say for giving helpful feedback is learn, really say what you love, not just what you don't love. So when you love something, if somebody submits something or they make something, you're evaluating it, and you just had a moment, like not only not just emotional stuff, but just stuff that really resonates with you, make sure to point that out. There's a couple of reasons for this. One, of course, compliments help people. They give them energy. They buffer, they insulate them from the bad stuff. But they're, more importantly, especially for writers, I've learned, is that compliments are directional. It's really hard to write away from something. So if someone says they don't like something, writers don't really know how to write away from that. What they do know how to do is write towards something. So keep telling them what you love and why, and that will help them hone in on that and do more of that. Okay, I think that's about it. I've blabbed on long enough. I've made a text version of this blog entry. It's on www.abyssal.co. Look for the link in the show notes. I also spent a lot of time researching this topic, so I put a bunch of extra topics in the show notes as well. There's the Creativity Inc. book by Pixar, which is invaluable. They have a whole, 1/3 of the book that I think is relevant to this topic. I could not comprehensively cover all the aspects here, or else this episode would never come out, and it already took me 3 months. So I would recommend Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull. I would recommend there's a chapter called Let It Be in the Creative Act by Rick Rubin. The Script Notes podcast has a great episode on this. All this stuff I'll link in the show notes. And I think that will cover it for this episode. Thanks for listening. Or if you have any questions, please comment on the new abyssal.films account on Instagram, or you can send me an email at charlie@abyssal.co. I read everything and I will respond to you. Thank you for listening to Movie in the Making.